everybody. My name is Peyton Lauderdale, and I am one of the co-founders of Gathering Hope, and I want to welcome you to Slaying the Stigma, which is our video series where we interview guests to not only educate other people about the miscarriage and infant loss community, but also to comfort other moms. And so I'm really excited to have my guest today, author Jenny Albers. And we were just chatting before this that we've both been following each other for a while now, but I'm so excited to meet you, Jenny. Welcome to Slaying the Stigma.
Thank you so much for having me, Peyton. I'm excited to be here.
Yeah. So if you would just introduce us to who Jenny is and kind of your story. I'd love to know like how you started writing, a little bit about your family, and then after that, just kind of launch into your story.
Sure. Yeah. So here's a little nutshell about me. I live in South Dakota with my husband, my 2 kids. My background is in social work. That's what my degree is in.
Okay.
But I've mostly been a stay-at-home mom for a decade. So I started writing about 4 years ago, which was about a year and a half after our second loss.
Okay.
And I had really felt, after our second loss, I had really felt sort of the strong sense of you're going to do something with this. And I always, I'm like, was that God? Was that me? I don't know. But I had this very strong sense of like, there's going to be more to this story.
Yeah.
And the only thing that I could think of that kind of made sense and fit was to start writing about it. And I've always liked to write, so that sort of makes sense. But I think a lot of that came from, in those early days of grief and really for, a year or two after, it was reading other people's stories
Okay.
that I could connect with that really, I think, helped. One, to feel not alone, but also just sort of the healing process and what I was feeling and going through was normal. Because in my real life, I didn't really know anyone, who could quite identify with what I was experiencing. And so being able to, read blog posts or whatever it might be, online communities, things like that, was really helpful to me. And so that's kind of how I started writing and how that whole thing launched. Is it just felt kind of like a natural next step for me.
And you started blogging first, is that right? Or was it just like
social media? Yeah, I mean, like mostly social media posts.
Okay.
Yeah. Yep. So I don't know if you consider that blogging or not. Some people do.
I
had a website.
I do.
Very good one. Yeah. Okay. Well, so yeah, mostly just on social media. Yeah, and contributing to other websites and things too. But
okay.
Yep. Okay. Yeah. And so let's see. As far as my loss stories go, 2014 was our first loss. Very early. It was an ectopic pregnancy. I don't even want to get into like the comparison thing, but I have experienced 2 very different losses.
Yes.
And so, at that time I had my daughter. She was my first baby. So she was 3 at the time. And when you're ready to have another, you're ready. And
yeah.
My friends were, who had kids around the same time as my daughter was born, were kind of moving on and pregnant again or had more kids. And so to have a loss and also have all these people around you who are pregnant and who you love and who you're close to, that was really hard. And also I was very much on, my timeline. I wanted my I wanted my kids 3 years apart. I had this vision of how things were going to go. And that set my whole timeline off, which isn't the most important thing, but you do think about that.
Yes. Are you an oldest child too?
I'm a youngest. I'm a baby. And I'm not type A personality. Like I'm kind of just a mess person. But I think when it comes to like family and family planning and kids, like you just have this vision. And so that was a hard thing to let go of. So I say that I was lucky with that. I didn't have to have surgery. I didn't, so there wasn't anything, physically major that came out of that. So then later that year, that was in January of 2014, I got pregnant again in the fall of 2014, and then in January of 2015 is when we had our second loss. And that was a result of PPROM, so
Okay.
premature rupture of membranes. Um, so my water broke at 17, almost 18 weeks pregnant, and then about 3 weeks later, I delivered our baby, and who is stillborn. So that was a long 3-week wait. And I think,
Yes.
one of the things with that was, a lot of the messages that people kind of give you are, there's something wrong with the baby, and like, so it's better this way, or, that kind of thing, which is like a horrible thing to say. But for my circumstance, I really, like, my baby was fine, but it was my body that had, where things had gone wrong. And so, that was like a very devastating blow. And for me personally, I mean, I won't say it was like a worse type of loss, but it was different for
It's
sure.
different. Sure.
Yeah. And, after you get past a certain point, you kind of think, okay, like maybe everything's going to be okay. And I did have I had a feeling during that pregnancy, and I can't even really say what it was. I just, like, there was a knowing that something wasn't quite right.
And it's
I
kind of
could,
like back here, right? Like,
yeah,
and you just kind of,
yeah. I mean, I couldn't have
like,
pinpointed. My appointments had all been fine. There was
yep,
nothing out of the ordinary. But we didn't really tell a lot of people. I wanted to wait until we were halfway through pregnancy. I mean, we
okay,
told our families. My husband told some of his coworkers. We told a couple of friends. But even people who were in my immediate circle. I remember I went out to dinner one night, and I think I was either almost to the second trimester, or had just passed the second trimester. And I was like, I should really tell them. And I didn't. And so I regret that, because it didn't seem real to a lot of people because I hadn't told them that I was even pregnant.
was that because of your previous loss that you guys made that decision?
Um, I mean, I think partially, but partially, like I said, I just really felt like there was something going on. And
Yeah,
I don't even have words to describe that. And I did feel more cautious, I think,
sure.
even though my previous loss had been very early on, like early first trimester. I think that did play into it for sure, but also just kind of this nagging
Yeah,
feeling. So yeah, and I think one of the hard parts about that was, I mean, a lot of the times there's not answers to why, but not having answers. And some of the theories were incompetent cervix, or there was an infection that we missed, or there was like placental abruption
mhm,
from, like where the placenta was, and PPROM, and like all of but it was like, which came first? Like, was it a cervix issue?
okay.
Was it a play into each other? And so there weren't any answers. And so kind of moving forward, after that was like, well, like, what do we do? Can we keep this from happening again?
Yeah,
When we don't even know, what the problem is. And I
right.
mean, I think that's really common, that's certainly not,
That's all of our biggest question is why, right? Like,
yeah,
and
yeah,
like, how can we
exactly.
drill down to the bottom of that? And like you
Yeah,
said, assure that this never happens again.
yeah.
Yeah.
So, um, so yeah. And so that was in January of 2015. And by the next year I was pregnant again, and that's another story. But that's my story in a nutshell.
Okay. Okay. Thank you so much for sharing both of your babies with us. Um, what would you say has been the most surprising part of your journey?
Sure. I don't think I can pick just one. So there's a few things that come to mind.
Okay.
One of them is how amazing the community is in the lost community, and how
I'm so glad
supportive.
you brought that up. I love that.
Yeah, I mean, just how supportive, for the most part, right? Like, you do come across trolls.
Sure.
But, for the most part, it just crosses all lines and all boundaries of, it doesn't matter who you are, or, what your value system is, or what your beliefs are,
Right.
or, any of that stuff that often divides people. When you tell me, or when I tell you, like, I know what that's like to lose a baby, it's an immediate connection. And so
Absolutely.
that, I don't, think I can say that I've experienced something like that, like in any other part of my life. And so I have a deep appreciation for that. And also, I don't know, just kind of the ability of women and families to really come together um, to support one another. So
It's
that's
like
what,
perfect strangers coming together and like
yeah. I
instantly
mean, and it's
having that
almost like,
connection.
yeah, it's so instant
Yeah.
that that surprised me. I mean, like I said, I haven't experienced that in any other place in my life, I don't
Yeah.
think. So that's one thing that stands out. You know, I am 6 years, almost 7 years into this journey. So there's like a large space, between my losses
Yeah.
and now. And something that has surprised me in recent years, that I wouldn't have ever thought I could get there early on, is that I am actually happy for pregnant women now and for my friends who are pregnant. And it wasn't that way for a long time.
A
Um,
long time for
a
me.
long time. Yeah, a very long time. And I won't say that, like the hard feelings have completely gone away. I'd say like mostly, but I mean, there are still little triggers or like, oh, what would it be like to be pregnant again? Or, oh,
Yeah.
what if we had had another baby? Or what if loss hadn't been part of my story and we would have gone forward unafraid of what might happen? But to just be able to like truly be joyful at the news of someone else's pregnancy is huge.
Do you remember the first time that happened for you?
I won't say I remember the first time, but I would say like probably in like the last 3 years. And I feel like I can think of just a few friends or a few people who had babies kind of in that time period where it was kind of like a 50-50, like, oh my gosh, that's so great. But then also,
Yes.
so it's kind of this gradual thing. But I hope that provides hope for people who are new on the journey. Like it's not always this awful. It's really
Yes.
awful
Oh,
for
I
a
think
long
that
time, but like
people
it's
need to hear
not
that
always
for
so
sure.
awful. And you will come out, I truly believe that you will come out of, kind of those really hard, like bitter. I was very bitter and angry for a long time. So I mean, I think that's probably normal for a lot of people.
I
But
certainly hope
it's
it's
not always
normal.
like a good thing to, you always don't always feel good admitting that. So,
Yeah.
and then, I mean, I think this kind of plays into that, like it's gotten easier, I didn't think it would, right? Like when you're in those first days and months and maybe years too, like you
Yeah.
just think it's always going to be really awful. And then probably the final thing that comes into my mind with that question is I've realized, so this year there's been a lot of loved ones and friends of mine who have lost babies and who are really in this hard
Okay.
spot of loss. And so I feel like I'm kind of on the other side of that. And it's been a learning experience and eye-opening for me as to how helpless I feel. Even though like I know I've done things and I know what to do to kind of be supportive, but it doesn't feel like enough. And so I don't think there haven't been people that are as close to me as there has been this year, with losses and people that I know deeply. And so I feel very helpless being on the other side, and I wasn't expecting that.
Yeah.
Which,
You kind of feel like you should have all the answers, right? And because
yes,
people
that's
look to people like us.
exactly.
And like, I totally understand what you're saying. Like, I sometimes feel like I'm being trite, right? Like,
yes.
and I'm like, I'm supposed to
Yes.
have all the wisdom to give, but like sometimes I feel like even my own words are just not enough.
It's just empty. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. So that's a newer experience for me. And it's kind of given me a perspective on, the people who are in my life sorry, I just had a message. I'm sorry.
No, it's okay.
People who are in my life during my losses, that like it is hard, even when you've been through it, it's hard to know what to say because nothing feels good enough. And you know that nothing is going to fix it. So anyways, that's been surprising to me as well, to kind of to switch roles, I guess.
But I think it helps maybe to give a little bit more compassion to those people who say all the wrong things.
Exactly.
At the beginning, and you're like, I can't believe someone said that thing to me. And it's like, maybe they just didn't know, or they just didn't know what to do. And like, if we feel that way, like, and I'm only saying this as a person who's almost like, who's about the same removed from losing a baby, of like, I can see now that they were just trying.
Yeah.
They were just trying really hard.
Yeah. Yep. Yeah. And there is, I think, a shift in perspective as time goes on, right? Yeah. And I think in any part of life there probably is, but that's just something that I've noticed also as the years go on.
Yeah.
So
we hate to say that, like, you know, that cliche of time heals all wounds. It doesn't heal all wounds, but I really do think, and I'd love you to speak to this, I feel like it does soften some things. Yeah. Like, it just is not nearly as raw as like I pictured my entire life being. There are certain moments where it all comes back in like an instant. Yeah. A conversation I have and I'm like, oh, I'm there again. Yeah. You know? But talk about that. What has time kind of done for you?
Yeah, you know, I was actually thinking about that and had made a little note about time. And that no, it doesn't heal all wounds, but I think it does make space for good again, and for happiness and for joy. And I think it makes space again for like perspective change. And, you know, I don't know, there's just a spectrum, I think, of grief, and that changes over time, which I think is a good thing. So yeah, it doesn't heal all wounds. I think there's definitely still triggers, but definitely softer for sure.
Yeah. Yeah. So you've said you've had a lot of people in your life in this past year who've experienced loss. Mm-hmm. What would you say to a mom or what have you been saying?
Oh gosh, probably all the wrong things.
What ideally?
Well, yeah. So, you know, I mean, I think some of like the basic things are like, this is awful. I'm so sorry. This is so unfair. I hate this for you. But also, like, I'm thinking of one person in particular, you know, like, you have to let people help you. You don't have to, but like, people want to help you. And like, you're not supposed to carry this all on your own. And, you know, if you have other kids, like, let us help you with that. Let us take them for a couple hours so that you can like sleep, cry, whatever you need to do. I do tell people, like, it's okay to step back, like, give yourself permission to step back. I think there's this pressure to just like push through and keep going with life. And you can't let this person down or that person down, or your kids need this, or your husband needs this, or your friend needs this, or your church needs this, or whatever it might be. But it's okay to step back from those things and take that space, and give yourself the room to cry and sleep and watch TV in your pajamas. I mean, there has to be like some kind of limit around those things, right?
Yes.
But, you know, I remember for me, like, I didn't go to birthday parties. I didn't go to church like regularly. Like, it took me time to get back into the groove of life. And I think we need to give ourselves permission to do that.
I wish someone had said those words to me. And you know what? Maybe somebody did.
Who can remember? I know.
Maybe someone actually did say that to me. I'm sure my therapist was all for me stepping back.
Yeah. Yeah.
In fact, now that we're saying this, I do remember she was like, you went to what? Why would you do that to yourself? Right. And I was like, because there's expectations for me to be there, and it wasn't okay that I wasn't there.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I think if I had maybe told her my plan, like, hey, this is coming up, she would have said what you just said. You need to give yourself permission to just be, just to not go to that.
Yeah.
Right now.
Right. Yeah. To just be. I mean, like, end the sentence there, to just be. Yeah. So, beautiful. I mean, I was absent from, like, my husband would go to things, or my husband took my daughter to things, or, you know, and I didn't go. And I mean, I felt okay with that mostly, because it just felt too hard. So,
Yes.
And that's not the way for everyone. I mean, I think some people like to be out, like, they like that sense of normalcy. So it's probably very much a personality thing too.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
that's what I have been saying, and what I would tell people is to step back if you need to, if you want to. That's okay. Like, you can't do it all. You don't have to do it all. And if there's any time in life to just kind of lay low, like,
Hmm.
I think now is it,
I
Um,
really appreciate you saying that.
and I think the other thing too, so there's that, and then kind of on the opposite end, I'm like, go find a community. Um, but for me, it was very much like an online community. So I mean, I know that there are groups, um, for lost moms, and when they send you home from the hospital, I think I've heard you talk about this before. There's this whole packet of things that you're like, I don't even know what to do with this, and it just kind of
Yes.
gets shoved away somewhere. And
Yep.
so there is probably a time and a place for community. Um, but I think just having, I mean, even if it's one person, a friend or an online group or something like that, just a space to go to or to be present in as much as you feel like you can or want to be, um, just to kind of help you know that you're not alone, and to give you that space to talk and say what you
Yeah.
really feel, whether that's through the keyboard or with your voice. Because I feel like there's not a lot of safe spaces just in general,
Yes.
to really talk about how you're doing, like how you're really doing. So,
I was just going to bring up that word safe, and I'm kind of jumping around in the questions that I
sure.
sent you, but um, I would love for you to talk about what makes a safe community. How, because you've created lots of safe spaces online. What to you makes that a place that's safe for someone like us?
Yeah, I think, I mean, non-judgmental, obviously. You know, One of the things that does come up sometimes is, you'll be talking about a loss, or somebody will share their story or whatever it is, and someone else will immediately bring up the topic of, say, abortion. And I mean, there surely can be overlap with those things, but like, this is not the place for debate on like life issues. This is a
Yeah.
place for compassion, um, and just like holding the hand of the person who's like opening up with their story. And I also think just, just general support. Like, I'm so sorry, and for a place for all the kind of what I call ugly emotions to
Yeah.
come out, without people telling you, well, you shouldn't feel that way, or like, God wouldn't like you to feel that way, or that's a sin. Like,
Oh, geez.
I mean, like, can we just be real that like
Yes.
these are like, whether I mean, I don't think anybody wants to feel those emotions, but like,
Yeah.
we do. That's humanity. And so just a space to really like let it all out, and without judgment.
I love that. I'm actually working on a list of things that I'm like, am I going to post this or not?
Yeah, I know.
Like those, like what you're describing of like, here's the ugly stuff that like
Yeah.
we just don't talk about, and I'll list one here. Is how like I turned to other things to numb, and like I drank a lot.
Yeah.
And I mean, I partied pretty hard in college,
Yeah.
but this was like a different level. And just the frequency and with the like expediency of how quickly I would consume things just to like tap out for a little bit.
Yeah.
Like, I know there are other women who have
Yeah.
done that. And like,
Yeah.
nobody talks about that.
Right.
Like, what are we now? And
Yeah.
there's a whole variety of things that we numb with, right?
Right.
You know?
Right.
So, and that's just like one of the things that I'm thinking of. But yeah, I creating these safe spaces is so important in any community, but like for this one, because there's so much shame associated with just the loss, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And then all the griefy stuff that comes afterwards is
Yeah.
just a wild array of different things.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I appreciate that you've created that space. And we'll delve into that a little bit more, but I do want to ask, like, so part of this series that we want to put out there is, you know, slaying the stigma of talking about this topic. So what are some things that, like, the general community needs to know about miscarriage and infant loss?
I think one of the biggest things that somehow, I don't know how, because I feel like we are getting better at talking about it, but that always gets missed is like that this is a loss. And I
Mm-hmm.
think, it's an invisible loss for like everyone but the person who's experienced it and maybe,
Sure.
some of the immediate family and things like that. Um, it's not a noticeable loss as if you lost, your mom or your friend or your brother or whatever it might be.
Mm-hmm.
So it's so easily overlooked. And I, I just wish people could respond to that with more compassion and not expect people to just move forward. I think especially like there is this sense of like, okay, move on, you can get pregnant again, or at least you can get pregnant, or maybe you can adopt, or like it's never like sitting with the person right now. It's like, well, here's what will come next. Everything's going to be okay because I'm sure that you can have another baby. And so I wish that we could just sit with people like where they're at and not try to like make it better by saying things like something good is going to happen down the road,
Yeah,
or you'll have another baby and then everything will be okay. Because like really we don't know that. I mean,
that is very
not
true.
everyone has another baby, but we like to act like that's going to happen and that's going to fix everything. Um, let's see what else. I think, kind of just the general like validation of loss and grief. Um, that this is a loss. And for as much as I just talked about this a few minutes ago, like, don't say this, or this is what I'm saying to my friends. Like, I should know all the right things to say. We don't always know the right things to say. But I do want to tell people, like, be cautious with your words. I mean, most of the time they are not meant to hurt at all. Like, so I absolutely can acknowledge that. But again, I think like sort of the talk of future babies or,
Yeah.
like at least you have this or like focus on the good things in your life. Like those aren't always helpful, especially in the early stages of grief. So,
Yeah. What were some of those things that people were trying to point you towards? When
God has a plan or like everything happens for a reason. And, I really hate the one, I don't know that anyone said this to me personally, but like I've heard it so many times now, like God needed another angel, and like that one just really like, ooh. So don't say
truthfully,
that.
God
Just
doesn't
don't
need
say.
anything from
I
us.
know, I know. So yeah, but I think very much like God has a plan. Like, well, why was it like this was his plan? Like, but you have all your kids, and it's just it can be a hurtful thing to say, whether it's not meant that way, but
Yeah.
it's just one of those other, it just like makes for more questions. Well, like, why was this his plan for me and not you?
Yes. 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 I do feel like in the last maybe even just 2 or 3 years, there have been more of like, say this, not this.
Yeah.
Avail like resources that are out there. And here's the only ironic thing about that is like I love these resources that we put together, but like who's sharing this stuff? It's us.
I know. It's, but yes, I have had some conversations recently about, man, I'd really love to like put out some kind of resource, like what not to say,
Yeah.
but then I'm like, the only people who are going to read it are like, who's going to read that? Me. Like, and I already know.
Yeah.
So I don't know if
Yes.
it makes a lot of sense.
Oh my goodness.
So yeah. And I
Yeah.
just think it's important to remember, like, people don't always know how to do this, but to just honor the life and the existence of the baby that was lost. So I mean, even if that's, you know, just a card or some, I mean, it doesn't have to be anything major. Using it, we talk about using the baby's name, or maybe it's like an ornament hanging on the Christmas tree, or like a
Yeah.
piece of small jewelry, or just something to say, like, I can't give you really anything but this small gift, but this is like in honor of your child. So
I love that. I love that. Jenny, I want to ask, where have you personally seen hope in your journey, and what are some of the things that have helped you to get through to heal? Not that we're ever healed, on this side of heaven, but what have been some of the things that have been key on your healing journey?
yeah, I think like one of the concepts that I've really clung to, and that I really feel like I clung to right from the beginning, is that like none of this is wasted, and that God uses our hurt for like some purpose of his. And maybe we don't always know what that is.
Mm-hmm.
But I had this weird like shower moment like very early on in my grief, and I found myself saying thank you. It's a weird thing to explain. I can't even really explain it now, but I think there was like this deep feeling of like, I know that this is going to change me, and somehow like I'm going to be better because of it. And not to say that like that's why it happened, or anything like that, but like it does change you. And I think and I think, for me, I feel like it's in a lot of ways changed me for the better. I mean, it's not like I'm, you know, some amazing person now. But I think for a lot of us, it does change us for the better. And I think that is like a huge source of hope, and that we can use, whether it's our experience or what we've learned, to move forward and help others. I think, like it talks about in the Bible, like you can be compassionate to others with the compassion that God has shown you. And I really like that verse. I feel like that's what a lot of us are able to do now.
Mm-hmm.
It's definitely made me more compassionate, and I do find hope in that. Just that, like the horrible things that happen to us really can change us for the better and help us to connect with others who are suffering in maybe a way that we wouldn't have been able to before.
You hit the nail on the head with that one, that we wouldn't have been able to do before. I think it really, it opens our eyes to so many things that we just didn't see before. And even not just other people who have lost babies, just in general of like, I never saw that before. I never had that presence of mind to see something that way before.
Yes, exactly. I mean, I think it's just really opened my eyes to like a variety of different kinds of hurt. And like you just suddenly see, like for a while, it's like I really felt like I was the only one suffering, but then like as time goes on, you're like, oh, it really opens your eyes to like a lot of people are really suffering in different ways. It took me some time to get there because I was very self-focused, which I think is also very normal in grief. But yeah. So like, I'm not saying anything bad about that. I think that's very normal. But then as time has gone on and you kind of get further out, it's suddenly like, oh man, there's just so much hurt in this world that I didn't even see before. So.
I'm totally on board with you on that one. Are there any resources that you recommend to other women who are part of this community?
Yeah. So I'm a huge reader, like the books. I ordered all the books, and there's been so many more that have come out since then. So I'm grateful for that. So I always give books to people, like, people in my life, especially that I know, who have experienced loss. And some of, I'd say like a couple of the ones that I've given most commonly, and one of them came out recently. So anyway, is Unexpecting by Rachel Lewis. And then Loved Baby by Sarah Philpott. So those are two that I think are really good resources. And then there's also a couple online communities that I'm not involved in, but that I have either heard good things about, or I am like acquainted with the people who run them. One of them is called Our Scarlet Stories. Our Scarlet Stories. And that's by Adriel Booker. And she has a book too. So her book would be another one.
Her book is so very good.
Yeah. So that would be another good book resource, but she also has the community to go along with it. And then I know Anna Kettle also has, she just launched this, I think recently, Space, or There's Space for You Here. So that's another good community that's very interactive and run by these women who have experienced loss as well.
I love her writing too.
Yeah. So, and then I'm a contributor for pregnancy after loss support, which
Okay.
is kind of the next step, right? But it's a great resource for moving forward. But also they focus so much just on loss too. So I think
Okay.
they have a really good balance of here's how pregnancy after loss goes. Here's what it's like to lose a baby. So I feel like that's a really great resource as well.
I'm sure that kind of is where the foundation of your book came from, of writing on that topic. So,
Yeah.
if you could you share a little bit about your pregnancy after loss journey? And then I'd love for you to talk about courageously expecting. I'm really excited for this to come out.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. So my pregnancy after loss journey, I think immediately, like after our loss, it was like, okay, like as weird as it sounds, it's like, I want to get pregnant again.
Okay.
Like I want my baby or I want a baby.
Hey, baby. Yeah.
And so even though it wasn't necessarily like an easy decision as to like when or how or like what to do next, you know, and this comes from talking to lots of other women too. Like
Okay.
there's just this sense of like, I want a baby. Okay, where am I going with this? I don't know. It took us some time. There was a break between, so we had lost Micah was our stillbirth. So we had lost Micah in January, and then
Okay.
I became pregnant again in November. So it was almost a year later. But in that space, like I immediately knew that if we were to become pregnant again, that it was going to be like really hard and really scary and really stressful. Um, and so, being able to have some kind of resources for me, pregnancy after loss support was kind of the only thing there was at the time. And
Okay.
they're still there and still doing lots of really great work. But there really isn't that much out there for kind of the next step, if that's the way that you go or the way that you choose or don't
Sure.
choose.
Yeah.
So it felt like there was just a lot missing. Like there's lots of books on loss, there's lots of support groups specific to loss.
Mhm.
That's something, there's therapists that specialize in that, but there really isn't a lot out there for pregnancy after loss. And for me, I feel like there was a kind of a hole in what was available. And I feel like it just, even now, doesn't get talked about very much. I feel like there's kind of this idea that, oh, once you're pregnant again, everything's great. And, you just move on and it's a given that you're going to bring this baby home because why wouldn't you?
Right.
Which in the mind of a woman who's pregnant after loss, like there are no certainties and
Yes.
like you've been down a horrible road. Why wouldn't you go down that road again? And so anyways, I say that courageously expecting, like the nutshell version is it's memoir meets devotional. So it is
Okay.
faith-based, but very much like here's my journey through pregnancy after loss, and it wasn't an easy one. So really I would like to meet women where they're at in kind
Okay.
of the ugly feelings of loss and pregnancy after loss, because it's not all roses. It's very scary.
What
Uh,
are some of those feelings
um,
that women go through? This isn't, and I'm genuinely asking because this
yeah,
is an experience that I have. And
right.
so what are some of those maybe like highs and lows of pregnancy after loss? And then also, how can we support a what, just like I would ask, how can we support a woman who's
Hmm.
experienced a loss? How can we support a woman who's pregnant again?
Yeah. I mean, every day is a high and low. It's like
Okay.
I'm pregnant, which is a high, and then immediately after, like
Yeah.
what if something like you're scared, what if something happens? Like you're constantly looking for blood. Like, am I bleeding? Am I losing my
Mm.
baby now? So I mean, it's just like the mental gymnastics just never end. So it's
Mental
just
gymnastics.
yeah,
I'm
it's
going to
just
remember that phrase. I like that. I can
yeah.
appreciate that for sure.
Yeah. So, I mean, just fear and anxiety, and wondering like, what am I going to do if I lose another baby? Um, so, it's like you still have the grief from your loss, and then it's just like a constant questioning of, is this it? Or like, am I
Yeah.
going to have to, like, is this just going to bring me more suffering? And so really I wanted women to know that like kind of the yucky experience of pregnancy, specific to pregnancy after loss is normal. And that, society expects pregnancy to be like this beautiful, just like glowing season of life. And it's not quite that way. Not to say that it's not that way for like everyone.
Yes.
We all have different experiences. But I think for a lot of us, it's much harder than what others would expect it to be. And so, I mean, like I said, it is a faith-based book. So
Okay.
some of, you know, my writing in that book is like comes from a place of regret. Because again,
Okay.
I am several years out. My son is now 5. And now like that was my last pregnancy. I didn't enjoy it really at all. I
Okay.
really like if I could have just gotten pregnant and then slept for 9 months and then woken up with my baby in my arms, like I would have loved that. But I think I missed a lot just because I was just so focused, or I was just so scared, and so anxious, and so there is some regret there, like, oh man, I wish I would have really like tried to enjoy it a little more. Not that anyone needs that pressure.
Sure.
But again, like from my own experience, there is some regret there. And so it's, one of my hopes for the book is that it can help women who are pregnant after loss to kind of see their experience or engage with their experience, like kind of through the lens of faith and hope instead of just the fear and anxiety.
Yeah. Yeah.
So,
What role has faith played in all of your journey?
yeah, I won't say that it has been, I feel like people often expect us to be like, God is good and like there's supposed to be this spin on it
Yeah.
that like
Oh,
because
yeah,
of
that's
God
good.
or because of Jesus, like you're never supposed to grieve or like life is just great. And
Yeah.
there's this hope of heaven and isn't that wonderful? And it is, like, of course it is. But I think we also need to meet people where they're at. So anyways, faith is definitely something that I have clung to over the years. Because I felt like I didn't have, like, there was nothing else. Like,
Yes.
there are no guarantees for any of this. Most people don't understand. And so just clinging to God and clinging to the hope of like this horrible thing isn't forever.
Yeah.
Um, Again, it didn't make things perfect. It didn't make things like go away or the grief better. But just kind of this deep seated faith of like, this isn't forever. And like the hope that things will get better. I mean, and they have, and we go through
Yeah.
these seasons of, I mean, that's
Yes.
just life. Up and they get better and then they get worse, and that's just how it goes. But that, like, in the end, it's not going to be horrible like this, is a source of hope for me.
I love the title of your book, Courageously Expecting, because like hope is such a courageous choice to make, isn't
Yeah,
it?
yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Yeah. Um, I love the title of that. How did you come up with that? How did you come up with the title?
Well, because I think like the decision to try again when you know that it could end horribly is, I mean, that in itself is an act of courage. And I mean, even if like you do have this, you wouldn't try again if you didn't have like a tiny, tiny bit of hope that something could go right. But
Yes.
I think it's courageous to allow yourself to feel that, or to have
Okay.
that hope. And then like the original title I flip flop back and forth was cautiously expecting, because like that's very real too.
Yes.
But anyways, in the end, I thought courageously expecting was a little. They were both very fitting, but hopefully, courageously expecting has like a little more,
I would definitely
a
pull
little
that one off
more.
the shelf.
Yeah, yeah. So, anyways, I flip flop back and forth. It wasn't my immediate choice, but I knew it was the better one. So,
Yeah. Um, Talk about who I know. It's kind of obvious who the book is for, but is this a book that you would gift to someone in their season before they're pregnant, or like upon them sharing the news that they are pregnant?
yeah, so I would say it's for women who are pregnant or who
Currently
are
pregnant.
thinking, yeah, or both, like who are currently
Okay.
pregnant or who are thinking of becoming pregnant after loss, like they're kind of in the middle. Um, and I say that just because I think it is a glimpse into kind of what to expect, even though I think we kind of know what to expect,
Sure.
already. Um, but it's definite, and like it starts off with kind of like the decision to try again. And so,
Okay.
and kind of how, I mean, I don't have any like wise words of advice about that. Like, I think you just get to a place where you're like, okay, like there's never going to be like a perfect time or like
Yes.
a time when something is guaranteed. So we're just going to do it. But it kind of takes you through, like that decision to become pregnant again to, the end of pregnancy. And, regardless of what the end of pregnancy looks like, acknowledging that it might not look like what you want it to.
Hmm.
So it's definitely for both groups of
Okay.
people. Yeah.
Okay. And talk about how people can get a hold of that.
Yeah. Well, so yeah, Courageously Expecting. It is available for pre-order on Amazon, Barnes and Noble now. So you can pre-order it. It comes out in January. Um,
That's so
but
exciting. I'm thrilled for you.
I know it is exciting. It is exciting. I hope it's useful for like the many women who are kind of on this long journey. So yeah, and you can find me at Jenny Albers online or my
Okay.
website, jennyalbers.com. And then I think we forgot to talk about Still Loved. I think I
Yes,
forgot
that
to
was,
mention
I was
that.
like, I have this little note right here, like,
Yeah,
hey,
I know.
don't forget.
I have a note too. So, and then like as far as resources go, I have started a community called Still Loved, which is it's super active on Instagram. We're also on Facebook, and then we have the website too, but Instagram is kind of the place where everyone seems to find us at. So it's at Still Loved Babies. And I started that community as a way to give voice to lost parents,
Okay.
just about their stories, about
Moms
their
and dads, I love
moms.
that.
Yeah, moms and dads. Here's just a little plug. Like we don't hear from a lot of dads. I feel like I get a lot of either messages or comments about like, what about the dads? And I'm like, I know, like I would, and a lot of times it's from the dads, and I'm like, I'd love to hear from you, like,
Yes.
yes. So, anyways, it is my goal for Still Love to hear from dads more often. I don't know. I'm not a dad. I'm not an expert. I think like they don't tend to talk about it as much as
Yes, I
moms
agree.
do, which is okay. But if they want to like talk about it and hear like have more conversations about it, we need to hear from you.
Yeah, this is the spot to share.
Yeah. So anyways, it's a community that I started in order for lost parents to share their stories and to kind of connect with one another through that. And I think for me it was healing to begin to share my story and to kind of put a name, or whether it's a name to your baby or just a name to this experience that you've had. I think it's an important thing, and I think it can be healing to put it all out there, and also it's good for the rest of us to have all these stories to read and to know that it's not just us.
It is so, every time I see one of your posts or I get a notification that there's a new post, it is, there's lots of lost communities out there, but this one is like, and I can't put my finger on what it is, but it's just beautiful. I really love the transparency in which people share on your page,
Me
and
too.
it is just so. I hate to say tastefully done, but I don't even know how else to
Well,
say
I'm
it.
glad that it is, because like, like
You know what? Like, it's just there's just a real kindness that shines through. That's really what I want to say.
yeah. Yeah, and for the Still Loved community, I am a Christian, I'm like a person of faith, and so kind of my writing is a little different from that
Yeah.
community, which that community is not about me. And so like we do welcome stories from everyone, and
Yeah.
whatever your experience is like, or whatever part of life you're in. So that really is for anyone. I get a lot of stories on faith there, or where faith is kind of woven into to the story, which is great. I get a lot that's not the case, which is also great. And so
Yeah.
I really do want it to be a space where no matter who you are, this is a safe space for you to share.
Yeah.
And I do think there's just so much power in being able to share your story. And I think a lot of people don't have that in their regular lives. I mean, I didn't feel, yeah, so I think it's important, like an important space to give people if they want to,
And the comments that people leave are just so like empathetic,
yes,
and tender and sweet and comforting.
Yeah.
I love it. I love
Yeah,
it. And doing that for when did you start doing that?
I started it at the end of 2019
Okay.
as like something else, and then it morphed, like you start something and you're like, oh wait, this is actually what it's supposed to be. So then like a couple of months later, I think in 2020 is when I really started sharing other people's stories and asking for submissions.
Okay.
Yeah, and we do have the website, which is stillloved.net, and that's where if people are interested in sharing their story, they can submit it there.
Okay. Stilllove.net. And what's your website again, so people can connect with you?
Yeah, my website is jennyalbers.com.
Got it. Okay.
Yep.
Thank you so much, Jenny. This has been an absolute pleasure to kind of get to know you and more about your story. I love what you're doing, and I cannot wait for your book to come out in January. It's really just so exciting, and it's refreshing to have this side of loss, that the pregnancy after loss, like a whole book dedicated to that. I just am so thrilled for women who absolutely there's that hole that you're filling, and I love that.
I hope so. Yeah. Thank you. And thank you for all the work that you do too.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
Yeah.
Well, this has been fun. Thank you so much, Jenny.
Yeah. Thank you for having me.
Bye.
Bye.